Insect allergies. The thing that we deal with is something called Hymenoptera. Fancy word, but what does that mean? Stinging insects that when they put their stuff into your skin can cause an allergic reaction. These would include bees, honeybees, wasps, hornets, yellow jackets, and red fire ants, which we actually don't have up here in Colorado yet. The problem with these is that they can, again, cause a systemic reaction. So sometimes they'll bite and they'll give a local reaction where it's red, raised, kind of painful. And that's something that you just have to deal with in terms of ice and maybe some cortisone on the skin. But what we worry about is when it becomes systemic. And that can be where there's hives that occur around the body, or when there's a gastrointestinal reaction or here in the gut, so that you have nausea or vomiting, or respiratory. You have problems breathing. Also, if it crosses a joint, that's when we worry. Because if you get bit here on the arm, and it's big here, again, painful but not systemic, we don't worry about that. But if it crosses through the wrist or up here into the other part of the arm, and again, it crosses through a joint or two, that's when we consider it systemic, because the next bite can probably lead to the other three things I mentioned. So what do you do about this? You're going to avoid them, right? Doesn't happen. I mean, you could say, oh, I won't be around them, I'll stay indoors. Well, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't be fearful of stinging insects. You shouldn't have to change your lifestyle, and also nobody can avoid them. I mean, I had one guy who said, oh, he got bit by a bee and had a systemic, he actually went into shock and went to the emergency room, came out, and I saw him and tested him and I said, yeah, you're positive and I have a treatment for this. And he goes, no, 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 I'll avoid them. I go, okay. So it was February, he was in his basement playing with his dryer vent, and that's where they were hanging out that winter. So one came, bit him, boom, anaphylaxis or systemic reaction, went into shock again, and the poor guy ended up there, came back to my office and said, you know that treatment you were talking about? Let's talk. So there is something you can do about it. But the first thing you have to do is figure out, okay, how do I know? So we have specific testing for stinging insects. So you can identify which one or different ones there are. Because if you were bitten by something, you don't always know what it is. Some people know it's a hornet or a wasp or a honeybee, and some people aren't sure. Also, there's cross-reactivity, meaning that many of these stinging insects share the same proteins in the stuff that they inject under your skin. So you may have sensitivity to a bee for sure, but also you could have sensitivity against a wasp or a hornet. So you have to test to know all the different things you're allergic to. What is the goal of testing, though, besides just knowing? And that is, there's a treatment for stinging insects, and it's something called immunotherapy. So if you do the immunotherapy for the things you're allergic to, then there's a 99.4% cure rate over a 5-year period of receiving those injections. Seems like a long time. It goes quickly, but if you're cured at the end of 5 years, that's it. And somewhere in the middle or close to the end of the treatment, if you get stung, usually you have no reaction or mild reaction. But to make the right quantity or amount of allergy antibodies to protect you, it takes 5 years. That's something we've seen in our patients that have been rebitten after 5 years. Actually, the Europeans, they actually sting their patients after the immunotherapy to make sure it worked. We can't do that because the FDA would have a cow, but we take their data and we know that 5 years is an adequate amount of time to get true protection from that. There's also been something about mosquitoes, and there's been an argument if you can be allergic to them or not. And the data now shows you can have an allergy to them, but they don't produce a systemic reaction. And at this time, there is no treatment for mosquito allergy. And you really wouldn't want to go through that kind of treatment if it really wasn't life-threatening anyway. One of the other things we also do is give you an EpiPen or epinephrine pen, because if you have a reaction and you have throat closure, then at least this will save your life. And we teach you when to use it, how to use it appropriately, and we teach your whole family and every significant person in your life and all caretakers how do you use this particular medicine. Because you know, in the heat of a reaction, you know, so, oh, you may not remember how to do it. So we reinforce this is the proper technique, this is how to do it. So you know, if you think you have a stinging insect sensitivity, it's something you really should look into and something that we can diagnose and treat you for.